666.
His Royal Highness Prince Turki al-Faisal, former chief of Saudi Arabia's General Intelligence Directorate, ambassador to the UK as well as the United States, founder and trustee of the King Faisal Foundation, and chairman of the King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies. Both of these which are really highly regarded research and grand institutions. And Dr. Mark Thompson, who we've had and has spoken a lot, has done tremendous research on socioeconomics of Saudi Arabia, is with the King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies. But Prince Turki wrote an article last week for the Arab News entitled, "America Should Laugh with the Kingdom, Not Scowl." Prince Turki, for those of our listeners who may not know it, holds a particularly elevated position in Saudi Arabia. His father, King Faisal, peace be upon him, is a revered figure for his leadership as well as his piety and integrity. King Faisal, if there were a Saudi Mount Rushmore, would certainly be on it. And the al-Faisal branch of the family in general is replete with accomplished, well-educated, and public-minded members. Prince Turki, in his own right, was an essential partner to the United States intelligence and security community while a member of the Saudi government and an effective and active diplomat representing Saudi Arabia with two of its most critical allies, the UK and U.S. As a private citizen, Prince Turki really occupies his own stratosphere in terms of speaking plainly, while also being seen as plugged into prevailing Saudi government attitudes. Now, he will always say, "I'm not a representative of the government," but his views and perspectives really capture a lot of the zeitgeist, I think, in terms of not only the government, but the Saudi populace. And in fact, few, if any, Saudis have the reach and persuasive abilities of Prince Turki, which is why this article written for the Arab News is so interesting, and we recommend it to you highly. The context of the article is this. A Saudi TV comedy show recently did a satirical sketch portraying a President Biden character as alternately confused and sleepy during a speech, while a hapless Kamala Harris character tried to literally and figuratively prop him up. It's the sort of thing we see pretty much every weekend on SNL and any number of comedy programs in the U.S. The sketch, however, seemed to hit a nerve with U.S. media outlets, and much ado was made about how Saudi Arabia was not a friend of the U.S., or Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had cleared the sketch to get back at President Biden for not meeting with him, or a slew of other perceived slights. Prince Turki aptly points out how hypocritical this response is, given the historical portrayal of Saudis and Arabs in American media. He writes, quote, "The portrayal of Arabs and Muslims in comedy, drama, adventure, and fantasy fictions goes beyond insults and denigration. The caricatures are reminiscent of how Jews are shown in anti-Semitic material. An Arab-Muslim character usually elicits derision and disgust, with an evil sneer on his face, a dagger around his waist, an unkempt white robe, a straggly beard, and piercing eyes with a dark shadow around them." He adds, quote, "American politicians of all persuasions shoot arrows at the kingdom to criticize and demean." I'd like to add here that in terms of media coverage, Prince Turki noted how a recent Atlantic interview with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman misrepresented what he said on a number of points. And I just want to add here, I hardly agree with this. And for those of you viewing this on YouTube, Lucian, I'd like to include a link to the full transcript of the interview, which was available. I'll send you the link. It was in Saudi Gazette.
You got it.
Please read it and form your own judgments. You'll find I was having a discussion with my two of my brother-in-laws this weekend, Easter weekend, about this very thing, because they asked me about the Atlantic article, and I said, "Let me send you the transcript, and I think you'll come away with a different opinion." For good measure, Prince Turki points out that U.S. oil policy pressuring Saudi Arabia to produce more, quote, omits to mention that it is the war in Ukraine, Western sanctions on Russia, and Biden's own energy policy that have contributed to the rise in oil prices, unquote. So that's the context of the article. Essentially, American overreaction to a Saudi comedy sketch. Like I said, it's an interesting read. In the larger picture, I think actually Prince Turki was very gentle in how he handled this. But here he is, an experienced diplomat with a distinguished track record of building ties with the U.S., is simply asking that America needs to be significantly more self-aware and work harder to be a better version of itself.
This is not just a really great piece. That was a very
excellent summary, Richard. There's a lot of places to go here, but one of the things that I was just thinking about this, and there was another piece that came out today that was also quite poignant from Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Shuaig. Actually, you sent this to me, Richard, and it's basically talking about how the 30 Democratic members of the U.S. Congress, which sent a letter on to the president, I believe, to the Biden administration on Yemen.
Right.
Was just sort of completely missed the point, and it sort of seemed, anachronistic. As the author writes, so the timing of the congressman's letter was out of touch with the global scene, as the U.S. is soliciting the support of all countries, including American sworn adversaries, to help address the Ukraine crisis. It is counterproductive to publicly undermine U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia, one of the oldest and most reliable partners in this region. In terms of public diplomacy and real action, at times of crisis, there is a need to shore up support from allies and partners. Differences of opinion and more serious disagreements are normal in a decades-old relationship, such as the Saudi-American partnership. These things need to be handled, he writes, country to country, not through the media. So just going back to the Prince Turki piece, it really is amazing how thin-skinned the U.S. media is about something like this, while it's just very common. And in fact, the reason why there are so many misperceptions about Saudi Arabia, I believe, in the United States is because the American media is just behind the times. And we'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to terrorist financing. But let me kick it back over to you on that. I think this is just a really great piece. And I love how you said, just do yourself a favor and just read it and think about it. You don't have to agree with it, but it's a great piece, and Prince Turki is an excellent writer and always has been.
He is very articulate, very well spoken, and I think that's an excellent point, Lucian. And I think it's a good linkage with that article. Behind the times, it keeps coming back, doesn't it? We talk about this. It's I use the term outdated, and just to foreshadow a little bit, one of our yellows today will be about the report that Iran and Saudi Arabia are going to renew their dialogue. They're going to meet again, possibly later this month. And some of that, in the reporting on that, some of that is all right. So there's some good news coming out of Yemen. There's a 2-month truce. There's been a leadership change really initiated and structured by Saudi Arabia after an extensive conference with 1,000 representatives from Yemen. Obviously, not the Houthis didn't come. They didn't want to do it in Riyadh. Understood. And nonetheless, there's a new leadership council in Yemen. Iran's rhetoric is changing a little bit. But again, and this is our problem we've been pointing out again, so much of our foreign policy, our national interests are informed and directed by domestic policy. And these 30 Democratic senators, I understand their point. I understand that they want to put certain issues to the fore in a relationship, but I think it's atrophied. I think it's not fully formed. I think it's outdated and reactive. And there's more and better things to be engaging with Saudi Arabia on now. And if you do that, you can also engage on these issues too. So anyway, I think your connection with of the two pieces was insightful.
Thank you. It happens very rarely, but
and by the way, in sort of putting together my thoughts on Prince Turki's speech, which is very good, I had to stop because there's so many things I wanted to go into. I started, going on about, thinking about, Saudi frustration with U.S. hypocrisy and double standards, and yes, they 100% do not support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but nor did they support the U.S. invasion of Iraq. They 100% regret and lament the human, the cruelty being suffered by Ukrainians, just as they do the Palestinians. And they've seen the U.S. support Israel in all of his actions in the occupied territories for decades. So for them, it's a fuller picture. There's more involved than just being our ally. And I do believe they're our ally, and I do believe we'll get through this. But this is what I mean. These 30 Democratic senators only see one thing. Or Democrats, they only see one thing. They only see it from one perspective. This is sort of what Prince Turki is talking about. Just become a little more self-aware, please.
And how inappropriate is it for the United States and Americans and the U.S. media to lecture Saudi Arabia on press freedoms and, you know, the lack of ability for Saudis to really say what they think, and then at the same time, out of the other side of their mouth, say, "We don't like you making fun of us." I mean, it's just like, I mean, I understand it, and I could see how it might seem a little insulting, but what the real insult actually is that our perception of Saudi Arabia is not even just as a little brother, but as a a fifth or sixth little brother way down the line. And it's like, well, how do you think that feels for Saudis to hear? So it's hard to really wrap your head around, and we could honestly go on this for another hour, because there's other things that this kind of ties into. Just
by the way, and Prince Turki mentions that in his in the article, in that the carrot and stick approach. He specifically says, look, in a carrot and stick approach. And this is, I'll quote him. American politicians of all political persuasions shoot arrows at the kingdom to criticize and demean, even to the extent of calling for a carrot and stick approach to dealing with Saudi Arabia. I tell them that we are not school children who accept such chastisement and reward. Our friendship with the U.S. stems from our shared interest in finding peace in the Middle East, combating terrorism, and challenging Iran's aggressions, and it's declared animosity to both of us. There it is in a nutshell. Let's update the relationship. Let's update how we engage.
No, this piece is so good. And Prince Turki has done this, really again. Since he retired. He's just so poignant, and he's so, he just really is, anyway, we're going to put this in the comments. We'll have a link to this article. Just check it out. And, it's just a really interesting piece and a really, really well-written item.